So a few days ago, Masa Grato R started a huge controversy over on Resetera with his tweet that the resolution in Xenoblade Chronicles DE was going to be handled a bit like Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And we already know how that turned out because that didn't run very well on the Nintendo Switch. So I been meaning to get to this for a while, but I think it's worthy enough of it to be a separate story on its own. And yeah, we're going to look at the controversy today and I will give my take on it. So basically his tweet is that he looked at the Xenoblade Chronicles DE configs and he noted that lib underscore nx.ini is similar to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, resolution as in XC2 is handheld 378 to 540p, a dynamic resolution, and docked 540 to 720p. So now docked for Nintendo Switch uses the power a little bit more, so from the power point when it's docked, so it can afford to run with more power and therefore a higher resolution. Whereas the handheld, you're running off the battery, and so they want to conserve the battery a little bit more, so they lower the power on that, which results in a lower resolution. Sharpening filter is still applied. It has now two more options, type and aware. Intensity is less aggressive in Xenoblade Chronicles DE. Now he goes on to say that it's 504 to 720p, not 540 to 720p. And it looks like the handheld docked rendering resolution equals native resolution. And then the handheld rendering resolution is 75% of native resolution, and dynamic resolution can go to 70% of rendering solution. So you're literally looking at Xenoblade Chronicles DE dropping 50% of its resolution down to say 378 when it gets busy. So when there are a lot of effects on screen, when you're in a battle in an open area, it's going to tank the resolution. So it's kind of like saying if you had a 1080p and it dropped down to 540, and honestly that's going to get pretty bad, especially I would say on a large TV. I think it won't be so bad on the handheld, even though it's 378. I mean, it's bad, but when you go from the large TV, your DPI is going to be a lot worse. Your DPI, your dots per inch, your pixel density for your handheld is like about 200 for the 6-inch Nintendo Switch, because it's at 720p. So 6-inch, that's, sorry, I'll start again. So 200 DPI for that, but your TV, because maybe you're using a 40-inch TV, or maybe you're even using a bigger TV, a 65-inch TV, to go down to 540p, especially on a 4K monitor, yeah, it's going to look pretty bad. So it's kind of like a warning to be prepared what you're getting into. If you're somebody who really takes it's a bit of a concern for you that it's going to drop resolution so much, then I would say don't get this game. Yeah, if that resolution is going to be a big deal for you, because I think it's going to be it's not going to be that great, and it's already at 720p anyway, so it's not even going to be that sharp on a regular dock TV. I think handheld 540p at that size is not going to be too bad, although I will say now that it's operating at non-native resolution, it's just not going to look very crisp. And especially with 378, that's going to get ugly. If you really want to know what 378 looks like on a Switch, go look up Doom, or even just go up look Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But I think Doom on Nintendo Switch was literally running at 360 the entire time. um, yeah, so now my take is that if you don't care about the resolution, then Xenoblade Chronicles DE is still a really good game, and there should be no reason not to get the game. Actually, I want to say something about what some things look like first, because Xenoblade Chronicles was previously a Wii game. So you can see this is the Digital Foundry. This is the Digital Foundry video that they made, and you should go and check it out because it's very insightful. But they did change something. So they talked about the things that they changed, like the hand. So they gave the hand's fingers now rather than just 3 fingers tied together. They've redone the faces, and I'll show the faces in a sec. But there are things that they've left untouched in this game. For example, you can see here, while they've done the wheel in a new texture, all of their clothes haven't been, at least in this cutscene. And it still looks like they've used the old textures from the Wii, which is basically the PS2, PS3 era, right? They've used all the old textures from that period of time, so they're all very low resolution. And sometimes it's just not going to look good. Now, in terms of the faces, they've updated the faces to make them look much better. So on the whole, the game doesn't look too bad, but if you're going to go and be picky and look at things, there are things that aren't going to look as good. Now, basically, I would say this game looks like a Final Fantasy X style of, I guess, level of quality. And the upgrade on the left, the Nintendo Switch, yeah, it looks much better. Now, it's debatable if you like the anime style or not, but for me, I think it looks much better than the old kind of chunky look from that era. And overall, I would say, you know, the game is going to be from another era. It's going to be from that PS2, PS3 era. Even though, you know, people are excited, well, this is a Nintendo RPG, it's going to be amazing on the Nintendo Switch. Just kind of know the fact that this game is basically 10 years old, and it's probably going to play like it as well. I think if you have the time, because sometimes, you know, you buy a game and then you just don't have the time to play like a 60-hour main story game. This game is going to take a long time. This is not an easy game to, well, not easy. This is not going to take a short amount of time to complete. So if you don't have the time, I would say just hold off for the time being until maybe it goes on sale, and then think about getting it when it's like, you know, 50% off. Now, that said, I've seen a lot of hate towards Monolith Soft, the developers of the game, and honestly, I don't think it's entirely their fault. People are saying, well, they're lazy, like, you know, they should have put more effort in, or Nintendo should have given them a bigger budget to make this game. Yeah, I don't think it always comes down to budget. I don't think it always comes down to laziness. Yes, sure, you can say they could have reworked all of the textures for the game. Yes, that's true, but at the end of the day, the Nintendo Switch is just not a very powerful system, and that's what people need to think about when they go and criticize a developer at the same time. Because when you look at the Nintendo Switch, it's operating at 16 watts per 16 watt hours, I believe. Now let me just bring up this, which I looked at the other day. So your Nintendo Switch at 720p is on 16 watt hours. It has a battery of 4,300 milliamps per hour. Your phone might have a bigger battery than 4,310. And look, your PlayStation Vita was on 8 watts, 8 watt hours. Even your new Nintendo 3DS XL was on 6.5 watts per hour. So, yes, you have a better chip. You have a new NVIDIA Tegra chip inside. But at 16 watt hours, is it even operating at 16 watt hours when it's in handheld mode? I need to look at more tests to ascertain of that. But there's a handheld mode and a docked mode. And honestly, the Nintendo Switch is possibly only a little bit better, maybe a 2x better than a Vita. The Nintendo Switch is basically probably no better than, say, a Wii U, honestly. Maybe a little bit better. And the Wii U only had 4 gigs of RAM. Nintendo Switch is not powerful hardware at all. When you have a PlayStation 4, which can do like 150 watts, and the new consoles are going to be doing 250 to 300 watts, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 doing 250 to 300, and this Nintendo Switch is just doing 16. This is basically iPhone level stuff. And yes, iPhones can output like a really high resolution, but they get super hot when they game, and you can only last a couple of hours on them. And the Nintendo Switch, they want the battery to last 3 to 6 hours, so they're not going to give it all that much power. So most of these games aren't going to be running. They are a lot less performance intensive. Now, the one thing that really kills the GPU or makes it work hard is the resolution. So that's why we see that the resolution drops to keep the frame rate up. And 720p was already really high for a gaming handheld, and that's what you see with the Sony PlayStation Vita, where they opted for a 540p resolution, because that was already really high for the Vita. And 720p, I don't want to say that it's too high, but it clearly would have made for better graphics if the Nintendo Switch was at 540p. Even if this was a 5-inch, I think this would be fine at 6-inch, because 6-inch at 720p, that's about 220 dpi, and for 5-inch it's about 180 dpi. I think 180 dpi still looks really good to the eye, and way better than the 3DS XL, which is like, I don't know, maybe like 20 or 30 dpi. Way lower with the 4-inch and the 240p resolution. But the reason why the resolutions are so low, or should be low, on the portables is because they just can't handle the 720p, and Nintendo wanted to, because they thought they could probably get away with it, because many of their own first party games would have been, I guess, lower graphical in terms of performance and assets. Mario and Zelda, they're a lot less performance intensive, so they probably thought they could get away with those titles, and that's why they could have a 720p. And 720p is going to sell a lot better than, say, if you put a 540p, because it feels like it's old tech and nobody wants it. So they really wanted to go for the 720p, and they wanted to go for the 1080 for their home console docked experience. But honestly, having a portable and docked, they did well. They did well to give the appearance that it works as a smooth experience for most people, like most 80%. But once you get to, say, like a Xenoblade Chronicles, where you have an open world, and developers are trying to make an open world that's very similar to, say, like a Final Fantasy game, and you're running it at a high resolution with great graphics and everything, the system just can't handle it. So all of this, I guess, criticism shouldn't be really directed at Monolith as much. Maybe a little bit, but I think most of it needs to be directed at the fact that the Nintendo Switch was clearly not powerful enough to run a lot of third-party games. It can do Nintendo's first-party games just fine, but it's gonna struggle for a lot of other things. And you see that clearly even with like a second party, I guess it's first party, Nintendo Switch, Xenoblade Chronicles is the first party game. I guess you could say that it's not performing well, at least at times. But the fact that it can't handle 720p and goes down to 370 or 300 or whatever it is, 380, that kind of tells me that you're not going to run these big open world games on 16 watts. So if they were to make a Switch 2, and they should do it quickly, because the PS5 and the Xbox Series X is coming out and is going to make that gap even bigger. They really need to, keep the display the same, 720p. Don't make it any bigger, because that's just going to cause more problems like this in the future. Keep the resolution low. As long as your DPI is high, then it doesn't really matter what your resolution is, because it's still going to look crisp. So keep this 720p lower, the same. Increase your GPU through a new manufacturing process, and get more transistors on the GPU, and new architectural changes, hopefully to get this 2x better than the Tegra. Maybe they can have a look at the new Cezanne chips from AMD, the new APUs. I don't know if NVIDIA is going to make a new Tegra, but yeah, they really need to keep the display, the resolution the same, and up the GPU, so we don't have issues like this all the time. We don't need to have these issues as long as the resolution is lower, at least on the handheld. So that's my take on Xenoblade Chronicles. I think people should still buy the game. I'm going to probably buy the game when it's discounted, because I just don't have as much time to play it these days. But I think by and large, for like 70-80% of the game, there shouldn't be an issue with Xenoblade Chronicles. But if you're one that has a problem with really low resolutions, then yeah, it's just a warning that the resolution for Xenoblade Chronicles is going to be pretty low in handheld, and I think it'll probably look worse on the TV. Okay, so that's it for this one. Please like and subscribe to the video if you like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.